Ladies and gentlemen, let me first thank Conrad for the invitation and the opportunity to address you on this computer-based maths education summit. I had several discussions with Conrad and a number of other people who are increasingly concerned how badly we do in education in the developed part of the world. Slightly differently, but most of the countries spend 5 to 6 to 7% of GDP on education. And when we look how fast we forget a lot of what we learn, how much more efficiently children learn different things in their free time, hundreds of times more efficiently. So this is something we have to be concerned about, everybody of us, including the politicians. So I start with a short intro on more general topics. Isn't it paradoxical that saying education, we usually mean schools and teaching, whereas learning is fundamentally older than schools and fundamentally more common than teaching? Your first cigarette and your first sex teach you more than all your math lessons. Sorry for this comparison, but there is a bit of truth in that. We are learning all the time. And now, 21st century, we come up with the idea of lifelong learning. What have we been doing so far? Thousands of years. It's been all lifelong learning. And the formalized educational system has killed that understanding even. So even the understanding that what we are doing in real life is we are learning all the time. And now we coin new buzzwords like lifelong learning, spend a lot of public money on trying to reintroduce it, actually fighting the formal education system. We have a strategic problem. One more thing, fundamentally important. The educational concept that was born started with Enlightenment, but ended up in a almost finalized form, alive until today, was the second half of the 19th century. This was also the time when there was a deep belief that if we try hard, do good science and research, we can find answers to all questions. And the right thing to do is to build that building as ideal as possible, in a Hegelian way, if you like. And the one thing that you have to avoid during all that process is making mistakes. No mistakes is an ideal. This is bloody nonsense, isn't it? Fundamentally wrong assumption. We have to involve making mistakes. We have to do much more mistakes in our educational process instead of avoiding them. By avoiding mistakes, we basically have a fundamentally wrong handling of risks. And real life is about handling risks much more than building an ideal, mechanically ideal system without controversies in it. So that is a little bit concerning education. Schools, education, national curriculum, textbooks, mandatory school years, state examinations. These are all elements of a system that we've built. Every nation. Some better, some worse, but in principle, all the countries in the same way. Has there been any real innovation into this educational enterprise? There's one big innovation in education, clearly, that's textbooks, printing. Printing changed education. But it was, how much, 600 years ago? Since then, really nothing important. There was a hope with radio. Radio will change education. Has it happened? No. Radio assisted? Yes. Some specific niche delivering of educational programs? Yes. But in the core, no. TV? No. Video? No. Internet? Maybe. I think, and I'm ready to argue, that kids learn from internet more than from textbooks. It's hard to measure because we don't have a technology to measure what they learn. But emotionally, somehow I have a gut feeling that they learn more. More importantly, they trust it more. They think it's much more functional in a specific way. And they are not that superficial to take everything that's on internet for granted. Elderly people are much more keen to trusting written text on internet than the younger generation. They are well prepared for the threats on internet. There are two things that I think are remarkable education-wise. Practical video tips on YouTube. How to fold a round tablecloth. I've done that myself personally. Round tablecloth folding, 35 seconds and done, perfectly. To think about a course of folding, a textbook on folding, how many pages? Think about it. Secondly, there are several rather efficient, adaptive computer programs, especially teaching foreign languages. Teaching languages is something that I think, especially in the early stage, up to, say, 5,000 words, up to stylistics, grammar. But the first 2,000 words, which is a regular level of high school graduates, computers can do that better today than teachers. Sorry for the teachers. Another lesson, personal experience. Most of you have had that as well. When you ask, and I have asked my grandchild, how to do a certain thing on a computer, and I expect him to explain what I have to do. He says, I don't know, let me show you. Think about it. It's a fundamentally different attitude. He really didn't know, but he was able to make it happen. So there is a pragmatic approach to education, and it's emerging here and there, outside the formalized education system. I truly believe that iPhone is one of the greatest innovations, also in education. We shouldn't praise Steve Jobs not only because of the design of the device, even not because of the user interface that clearly was a trendsetter, but first and foremost that he did away with 500 pages manuals. The manuals are dead. We don't need manuals anymore. We need our phones. We don't need the manuals. Why I'm saying that? Manual is a textbook. And very many of our schools are teaching us textbooks, not even the subject like maths or a discipline. They teach us textbooks. But we don't need textbooks. We don't need a training or knowledge about iPhone. We need to know how to use it. One step further, we don't need to learn math. We need to learn how to use math. This is a very different thing. And I believe this is in tune with what Conrad said before. That is the real change. So, any discipline, but as we speak about math today, first and foremost mathematics, yes, it's a discipline, it's a subject, it's a logical universe, it is a mental exercise, it's all true. But for most of us, it's a toolbox. iPhone is also a toolbox. It helps us to solve problems in communication. Maths is an iPhone, not its manual. And that, I think, is the message that I wanted to convey to you. If this is true, what I said, it's not about innovation in education. It's about a revolutionary change. It changes some of the very basics of education. If this is true, I think we gradually start to understand why it's so complicated to change. You can compare it to changing traffic from left hand to right hand in Mayfair only. It's not working. So I very much agree that a key point in this change is addressing the issue of assessment. Because by and large, we assess how good we are in learning the manuals. But if we are not teaching manuals anymore, but the real thing, we cannot assess how successful we are in teaching a real thing by assessing it based on how well we have memorized a manual. I'd even go further. I would say if somebody has really memorized a manual of iPhone, he can't use it anymore. He's too smart, he's too clever, he can't use it anymore. Assessment is fundamental. It's almost like in quantum mechanics. When you really want to position a particle, you lose everything else. Momentum, velocity, all that stuff. It's all about measurement. What we measure is what we get. If we measure a wrong thing, we set the wrong motivation scheme, and we end up in nowhere. That is fundamentally critical. So is it possible to address mathematics as a discipline instead of a thing in itself, but rather as a toolbox? Clearly, it needs a different mental attitude, a different vision. But it of course, needs a different technological platform. First steps have been made, by several companies, institutions, specifically by computer-based math people. But it's still a long way to go. Of course, we have to increase the level of to develop the interface to the level of best services delivered on internet. Students are frightened, even with the complexity of a graph in the first place. They have to be brought to that level much more slowly. As an example, Estonia. We've been doing well, pretty well in PISA. I think we are good at traditional education, but we clearly see that we haven't been able, as a country, as an economy, as a society, to transform that into productivity. And secondly, through several tests, we've seen that how fast we forget what we've learned in schools. So there is an ambition in the country, including the political ranks, the ministry. So there is a mood of change, despite all other good and bad things, what I know a lot, I think there is a certain mindset to take risks also in education. And that was why I managed to convince people in Estonia to try in maths, teaching one segment of it, statistics, which I think is understandable why, in Estonian schools, and we are committed to make it mainstream. Let it take 3 years, 5 years, I don't know. Although the preliminary results are so, let's say, 50-50, I see from the eyes of the people involved that we are doing the right thing. And we have to move ahead. Despite the criticism, despite the skepsis, despite the drawbacks that are also there, we have to move on. And I hope my colleagues in the ministry will do that. What are the critical issues? Assessment, as said before. Secondly, we have to fight a fundamental misunderstanding. People say computers can't teach. They can, they do, in a very efficient way. Understandably, there are political interests behind it. OECD meeting in Helsinki, a strong representation of teachers' unions, telling that teacher profession must stay. Computers are there to help. Computer-based versus computer-assisted. That is a political fight as well. There are interests. Millions of people, depending on a country. Tens of thousands in Estonia. We have to break that ice. Computers can, will, and shall teach. Without exceptions, I would say. Of course the teachers will not disappear. That's not the problem. That's not the problem. But they have to understand that they have to change. Fundamentally, accepting a number of principles that they have been reluctant to accept so far. I have almost used up my time. I'm sorry that I haven't been maybe convey all I wanted. Maybe there's a chance during a discussion, but there's not much left. Governments. The question Conrad posed was, how far will we be in 20 years' time? 20 years' time is a political nonsense. It is almost impossible for any of the modern democratic governments to start the change where the fruits are 20 years away. And most probably even not 20, maybe 30 years away. So I would speculate that despite the efforts different governments, different ministries, different institutions undertake to change the course, most probably the breakthrough will come from elsewhere, not from the public sector. What do we see in higher education today? With massification of higher education and rising prices, pressures on the public budget, rising tuition fees, we see that students become more and more critical about what universities deliver, especially on the master's level. They ask for shorter courses, much more pragmatical outputs. They would like to skip all kind of long, sophisticated theory that has been developed actually in the 19th century and that the 20th century professors are teaching them. They want a 21st century stuff. Short crash courses, lectures no more than 3 minutes, 1 minute. Well, sorry for that. You can make it half an hour, but if it's good, you'll have your students. So there is a pressure from the student side. They ask for more efficiency. And starting from higher education, I believe that there will be private providers who are offering courses starting from simpler, say, languages, where they can deliver much more efficiently. And in Estonia, we've passed a regulation that, yes, in curriculum we have 3 foreign languages, A, B, and C. English is usually the first. But in order to graduate a school, you simply have to deliver an independent language examination certificate, be it then a TOEFL test or similar. French, German, Russian, the same. How you reach that goal is your own business. And there are already on the market programs that do it time-wise 5 times more efficiently. 2,000 words vocabulary in 200 hours, contact hours, whereas in a regular program you spend almost 2,000. So let us try further. Let us try to convince our governments to change, but let us hope that the other initiatives outside the public sectors will force the governments one day, sooner or later, to change as well. Thanks for the invitation, and I'm sorry for overusing my time.